Krista Faye Creations presents Earth's Second Chance by Krista Faye. Dedicated to Roberta. Where the evergreens grow. The Dryad pauses as she passes the main ship and its glade of vibrant flowers, abuzz with the comings and goings of the fairy folk. Spotting a centaur family conversing in hushed tones with a trio of merfolk at the river's edge, she nods to them. The quietness settles thick like a fog, as even the birds seem silent this day. All lending to her mind, drifting back 18 years. She stands watching, as the alien pair step over to the offerings left by the animals. Each trying to entice the crying bundles they hold, with a sample. One dangling a fish in front of the more boisterous crier, who shows no interest in it and cries louder. The other picks up some ripe berries that burst in his hand, the juices beginning to trail down his fingers. His large eyes round, as the softer crier's lips latch onto his fingertip and she suckles. In that instant his heart melts, bonding him to the care and safety of this small charge he holds. The first observes this and smiles, just as the shimmering silvery form of the Dryad approaches. She pauses by the water's edge to converse with a young merman, then glances their way. Waving over a passing pair of fairies. The merman dives from sight and she requests something from each fae. They quickly nod, parting ways to fly off on this new errand. Returning a few minutes later, the merman, with a mermaid now by his side, each hand her something, then press to the embankment to watch in excited anticipation. One of the fairies returns, her wings beating hard as she struggles to fly while carrying a long pointed thorn as big as she. Her burden is deposited into the Dryad's awaiting hand, with the greatest of care. All heads turn as the second fairy returns. Leading the way for a centaur couple, who slowly herd a nanny goat into the clearing. Their offspring, a young centaur and a young kid goat, bring up the rear, as they happily prance about with each other, while following their parents. Nodding her thanks to the fairies and the centaurs, the Dryad steps over to the nanny goat and kneels. Her touch is delicate, as she begins to fill the hollowed flexible layer of the jellyfish the merfolk brought her, with the enriched milk from the nanny. Once both sacks are given a portion of milk, the Dryad stands. Her smile warms, as she steps toward the Outworlders, who study her actions in every detail. She hands each of them a milk sack. Demonstrating the best way to squeeze the opening closed and hold it up. Letting the creamy white ballooning budge dangle below. Then carefully punctures a trio of tiny close-knit holes into the underside of the budge with the tip of the thorn. The warm creamy white liquid begins to drip out, as the Dryad next guides the alien's hand to the crying infant. A few droplets fall and land on his cheek, and the crying stops. His lips smack together then open again. His small head turns slightly and he latches on. Drinking the liquid with hunger, his tiny balled fists relax, and he begins to knead the Outlander's hand. The moment the infant's tiny fingers wrap around his digit and squeeze, he's hooked. Creating a bond that neither time nor space could ever break. The months passed in much this same fashion, as multiple feedings were needed by both infants. They seemed to mostly want to sleep, eat, and leak. They leaked a lot, the new parents were quick to discover. Multiple cleansings were added to the daily routine, along with weekly recordings of their growth. They would get some free time each day, as the fairies came by and would circle above the infants, just out of reach of their little hands and feet, that both would bat at them, as they cooed and giggled. Every month, the Dryad would stop by and introduce a new item to their diet. Sometimes a grain plant, she would powder between two rocks then mix with the goat milk. She would scoop the soft mixture up on her finger and feed it to them. Other times, offering them the juices of fruits or berries, which she would encourage them to sip from hollowed nutshells. Always the Outworlders would watch, taking notes on how to prepare the items, and thank her with a deep bow of gratitude when she departed. Returning to her tree for another cycle of rest and meditation, the memories begin to drift off back into the safekeeping of her mind. A lingering thought troubles her, as she blurs and blends with her tree. Where are the two now, and what are they doing? She lays back on the moss-covered ground, staring up at the clouds, as they drift by overhead. Thankful to have found this clearing, surrounded by the evergreens, that swayed gently in the breeze. Growing tall and lush on this forested island, surrounded by the smooth reflective water of the river. Her tears threatening to fall, having been held in check for so long. The memorial service for her two fathers, still breaking her heart. Mother was there, so grand, poised, and regal. As were her best friends. Still, she needed this time away from them all. Time to try and clear her head. Slowly her lids close, as the tears break free and trail downwards to moisten her tan cheeks. Just as slowly, her childhood memories wash over her, as they carry her back to those carefree days. They're running, having found their legs, and learned how to use them. The breeze tickles their bared skin, as the last of the coverings they escape from trails behind them, to float and land on the blades of long waist-high grasses, that part where they pass. The alien pair stop their work instantly to give chase, as they hurry after them. Scooping up the discarded coverings as they go, following that trail to where the two toddlers run. Spotting a silvery halo of light, the toddlers run towards it, their little arms outstretched, as each calls out in greeting, "Mama." She crouches, as she embraces them both. Pressing a feather-like kiss to each of their brows. Carefully she untangles herself from their little arms, and stands as she smiles kindly to the two outworlders, who join them. Each clicking and clacking at the toddlers, in a light form of discipline, as they start to redress them, with the coverings they retrieved. The male of the two receives a hair ruffling once he's clothed, bringing about some giggles, along with a happy "Duh" from the toddler. Taking his little hand in his larger one, both father and child begin the trek back to the main craft. Once she's dressed, she's picked up, her cheek softly caressed. She wraps her arms about his neck as she snuggles in safe and secure. Softly she whispers, as she drifts off into a nap in his arms, "Dada." Sitting up, she sighs longingly, as her legs are drawn up. Her arms wrapping around them, and her chin coming to rest on her knees. Glancing upwards to watch, as a fluff ball of a cloud drifts by, blocking the sun a moment, before drifting on. "Cloud," she murmurs, as another childhood memory sweeps over her. The one where she fell, and skinned her knee. One of the aliens crouches beside her, as he pats a dampened piece of fabric to her wound, cleaning it. Seeking a distraction from the coarse fabric, she looks up and giggles, as a fluffy cloud passes overhead. "Cloud, Daddy. Bunny cloud." A series of clicks follow her statement, as Daddy questions her curiously, but the question is overlooked, as Father arrives with a pulp salve he applies to her knee. Once free from their attentions, she gasps with delight, as a rabbit hops by a few feet away. "Bunny!" she squeals, as she skips off to chase the rabbit. Both outworlders, silently watching her intently, and studying the small white long-eared creature she plays with. Daddy looks up and nods as the cloud, though slightly changed now, still resembles the mammal right down to the fluff ball of a tail. Father has a theory, but needs the boy to test it. With a parting nod to his companion, he heads off in search of him. Finding the lad, playing with two other young males, Karun, the centaur, and Tobias, their troll friend. Father steps over, laying a hand on the boy's shoulder. He points up to the white drifts in the sky and clicks out a question, making the young lad laugh, as he answers lightly. "Clouds, Father." He studies his son's face, then kneels, as all three boys huddle close. Carefully, he draws a small long-eared, four-legged mammal, in the dirt. Finishing with a fluff circle for a tail, and repeats his question. All the boys look at the drawing curiously, just before a pair of answers are blurted out. Tobias chuckles as he informs them,
"They're very soft and they have long whiskers that twitch.
And they hop around like this."
Karun adds, as he tries his best to hop on his four long hooved legs, which bring forth a fit of laughter from the other boys.
Karun is a bunny rabbit, Karun is a bunny rabbit.
The lad begins to tease his friend, who stops and turns a deep red.
"Am not."
The centaur retorts, as he scoops up a pine cone and throws it at the lad. Slowly Father stands as he proudly watches his son catch the pine cone and sends it arcing through the air to Tobias. The teasing is instantly forgotten, as the game of catch resumes, with all three children running apart and the cone being tossed around between them. The young man blinks, as he stares at the reflection of a cloud, blocking out the sun on the smooth watery surface. When the sun's reflection returns, he sighs, with a shake of his head, trying to clear his mind of the memory. The memorial service was hard to get through. They seemed to be getting harder, each year. He had tried to meet up with Mother afterward, hoping to talk with her, but had just missed her, as she returned to her tree and became one with it. He recalls having looked around, at the exotic and vibrant landscape encircling the main ship, that had been home all his life. Their home. Surrounded by the sacred flower gardens, fairies, trolls, pixies, merfolk, centaurs, and nymphs. Suddenly feeling out of place, he needed to get away to clear his head. That's what brought him to this island forest. Untouched by the more exotic elements, back home. Lingering by the water's edge, he glances around as Karun gallops further ahead, into the vast evergreen forest, with a herd of wild ponies. A small fish jumps in the water, drawing his attention back to its clear smooth surface, that becomes distorted by the extending ripples, that grow larger until they lap against the bank of the river. His thoughts, beginning to wander back, to when he was around 8 years old. It's a winter night, and he sneaks outside, as large snowflakes fall sticky and damp from the sky. The night's hush meets his ears, as he looks at the building snowdrifts with bright-eyed awe, that pocket the clearing. Feeling like he's discovered a wonderland of white, he steps over to the largest drift, and studies it for a time. Quietly he begins to hollow it out, creating a large square opening, as the landscape slowly begins to lighten. Still, the snow falls thick and wet as it clings to everything it touches. She comes out and smiles a morning greeting. Pausing long enough to look at the snow structure he carves. When he stops to blow on his chilled hands, she offers him the steaming wooden mug of liquid she carries. Both father and dad witness this interaction as they step out of the main craft and make their way into the glass laboratory. While he warms himself by drinking from the mug, she steps into the opening and looks around slowly, then steps out again. She begins to roll a snowball, then another. Once to size, she labors to roll them into the snow structure. Warmed now, he joins her and assists, as the smaller ball is placed atop the first. All morning, they continue, until many snowballs take stage in the opening. Neither having uttered a single word, as they work in tandem, and it's that silence that draws Dad and Father out from their laboratory to stand and watch them closely. By midday, they both pause and look at each other, then back at the snow scene they constructed. Consisting of a few snow sheep and 4 snow people. Instinctively, they both know something is missing, so they return to the project, and while she works on the snow folk, he starts to work on a small center structure. Having found a pair of long wooden sticks, with half-circle hooked ends, she adds these to 2 of the snow people, standing closest to the sheep. While he fills the center snow structure with straw. Together, they roll out and lift a tiny snow bundle, which they place carefully in the center of the straw, then both stand back to admire their handiwork. Softly, they begin to whisper as Daddy and Father join them. Clasping their hands, the 4 study the snow scene closely.
I remember this.
He states, looking up at his father.
Me too. I was a sheep.
She adds, as she points to one of the snow sheep.
I played the donkey.
He continues, as he points to the female snow figure and whispers.
She sat on my back.
Looking up at Daddy and Father curiously, they recall the exchange of glances and clicking. Both Outworlders are now certain the children retain memories from their past life, as it corresponds with their current growth.
Teacher said it's important we never forget. Mine too.
He adds. The elders curiously click out questions and listen intently to the answers as they lead the 2 inside for warmth and nourishment. A smile curves her lips as the memory dims.
What was in that drink Mother gave us?
She ponders aloud, the effects rushing through her body. Her fingertips and toes are still tingling.
Don't know.
A sparkling rippled reply comes from the water's edge. Surprised, she turns to watch as a mermaid lifts herself out of the water to sun on a large boulder. The tip of her aqua tail, dangling in the river.
What are you doing here?
She asks curiously.
I followed you.
Did Mother send you?
Nope.
Then go away. Can't you see I want to be alone?
Even if I go, you still won't be alone. He's on the other side of the island with Karun.
Oh, and Tobias?
Surprised by the question, the mermaid stares at her.
Don't tell me you're still in heat for Tobias?
I've never been in heat with Tobias or anyone else. Besides, it's not like it's written in stone that my future is bound to him. A girl likes to have options is all.
A bubble of laughter mingles with the mermaid's quick-witted retort.
When was the last time you viewed the magical story Dust?
Having learned at an early age, the best way to get out of a losing conversation with a mermaid is to walk away into a forest. She slowly stands to do just that, smiling to herself as she hears.
If you don't want him, then I'll take him. He's so strong and dreamy.
She breaks into a laugh, calling back over her shoulder.
Good luck with that.
It's not like she didn't want him. She really didn't know him anymore. Having spent her teenage years with Mother, they had grown apart. As she walks along the trail, to the other side of the island, her thoughts drift back to those days they were inseparable. Treasured days, sitting in a warm sunbeam while the fairies fly about their heads, as they weave strands of hair into a less wild, breeze-blown mess. Days where they ran off to ride the ponies together, galloping along a forest trail, with a young centaur they named Karun. Learning to swim with the merfolk, and telling them the names of items they would bring back from the bottom of the oceans and seas, and how to use them. Playing hide and seek among the treetops and ferns. Each day was filled with exciting new discoveries they both looked forward to. It was on one of those days they all met a young troll they named Tobias and became instant friends. On the days when the three boys wandered off without her, she would miss his company. The fairies and mermaids would fill those days with her, as they taught her how to braid flowers together, or weave containers out of reeds, vines, and long grasses. They all sang and told stories. Best of all were those quiet times she would walk with Mother. Animals of all types and sizes would walk with them, wandering off again, as they found treats of berries and grubs. Mother, always taking the time to show her the differences between the good things to eat and those that would make her sick, and always taking the information back to share with him. It seemed a lifetime ago. Her thoughts returning to the present, she wonders curiously why he's here. She'll have to ask him, and to do that she'll have to find him. So she continues walking. His thoughts continue to wander. This time to his early teen years. To a time when things had changed for them, while fishing on this very embankment. Father and Dad seemed to be spending more leisurely time with him, taking a deeper interest in his speech, behavior, and interactions with her and their friends. Learning the names of the planet's growth, that always seemed to come out of nowhere and at random times. Today he is showing both Father and Dad how to spear a fish. A long stick, with a sharpened end, poised up over his shoulder. She giggles as she runs over to join them, carrying a duck whose injured wing she had bound. Lifting his finger to his lips, he smiles as he exchanges a look with the elders, and points to the clear swimming image just under the surface. All four watch with bated breath as it slowly circles. As his fingers grip the stick and his arm tenses. As the duck wiggles free from her grasp and jumps into the water with a splash. As the startled fish quickly swims away. He turns on her and accuses.
You did that on purpose.
Huh?
She blinks in shocked surprise. Her eyes beginning to well up as she shakes her head in denial. Dad and Father step close to him, each resting a hand on his shoulder as they click out words of comfort and suggest he apologize. Stubbornly he stands his ground, with each elder silently bestowing a stoic look. A moment later, he sighs and looks around until he spots a water lily, further along the riverbank. Wading out into the water, he plucks it, then returns only to find she ran off into the forest, passing Tobias, who turns and follows her. Stopping mid-stride, he looks back to his two elders, who give him an encouraging nod, then continues deep into the evergreen growth. Cradling the delicate blossom in his hand. Unable to see them, he follows their voices. Overhearing their words along with their sobs.
I didn't do it, Tobias. Really, I didn't. Both Daddy and Father took his side, though. just like they always do.
They've come to a stop in a clearing from the trees, and he watches, as Tobias brushes a tear from her cheek.
Are you sure? He's always telling us how your fathers always take your side and spoil you over him.
From the trees, he listens closely, surprised to hear her echoing words he himself repeatedly said. He watches her slowly nod and sniff as Tobias, standing close, takes her hand and squeezes it lightly, as she confides in him.
He gets to do all the fun things. They're even teaching him how to use the two small crafts. I'm not even allowed to play ball with any of you.
Tobias smiles as he gazes into her eyes.
If you were being charged at and about to be tackled by a centaur, you'd understand we don't want to see you get hurt. Maybe your fathers feel the same way?
Kind-hearted Tobias, gentle and soft-spoken. How many times had he smoothed out rifts between Karun and himself? He's also surprised to realize how much her words hit home. Thinking back, he begins to question if he ever asked her what she wanted to do. Remembering the times, he would find her swimming with the merfolk, then suddenly find herself alone bobbing on the surface, as they all dive deep to continue their games and explorations. Or the times Karun, Tobias, and he would run by and see her sitting in a field, surrounded by an assortment of small animals. Singing to them, or telling them stories, as they nibbled whatever offerings she would bring with her, from the palm of her hand. She has a quiet way about her, and the animals seem drawn to it. The answer was no. Not since that one time, a year back, when he stumbled upon her on the beach.
What you doing?
He asks, coming to stand behind her, as she kneels in the sand before a pile of sticks.
Cooking some eggs. Want some?
At that moment, he spies the half-dozen shelled eggs beside her. Hesitantly, he nods.
Okay. What can I do to help?
With a warm smile and quick glance around, she replies,
Can you find a good-sized flat rock for me to cook the eggs on? It needs to be washed clean in the lake before we can use it.
His eyes round in surprise when he hears the request.
Sure.
Unsure what classifies as a good size, he scans the sandy, rock-free beach slowly, then hems.
Where would I find one?
She casts him a glance, before pointing first to the lake, and then to the trees.
Try the water, or you can take that trail. I passed one that looked about right 25 steps in.
He decides to take the trail, and as he enters the trees, he begins to count out his steps. By his 20th step, he starts to study the ground cover closely, and spots the flat rock, which he retrieves, and carries back to the lake to wash. Returning to her, he watches, as she continues to vigorously rub two sticks together, until an ember falls onto a dried grass bundle next to the stick pile. Gently, she blows it into a flame, and carefully rests it in a shallow hollow of sand. Sticks are added, and he blinks in amazed wonder, as the flames flick then catch and dance along them.
How?
She shrugs, as more sticks are added.
I just remembered when I found the eggs.
Together, they set the rock on top of the flaming sticks, and each watches, when the moisture begins to sizzle and bubble on the flat surface, as it gets hot.
Now what?
He curiously asks.
We add these.
She reaches over, and picks up a couple of eggs and hands him one. He studies the egg, and then looks across at her.
How do you know one of your critters isn't inside it?
It's not warm.
She explains, as she taps the egg against the rock and separates the shell.
If one of my critters were inside, it would still be warm from the mother's body heat.
He owes as he watches her add another egg, then marvels as the clear outer edges begin to turn white, and the yellow centers break and mix in, as she swirls it all together with the end of a stick. Both their stomachs growl so loudly, in anticipation of this new treat, that they both miss the first warning signs of their protective fathers coming down the trail in search of them, sniffing the air worriedly. The elders break into a run when they realize their children are sitting next to a fire, and fearing for their safety, they rush over. Each scooping one up in their arms, clicking out dire warnings, as they kick sand onto the fire, putting it out. Almost teenagers, both humans struggle to be freed. His voice, not breaking and squeaking, as it has been for the past month, calls out sternly in a strong baritone.
Father, put me down.
Her voice mingling.
Daddy, we were just cooking eggs.
Not fully understanding, They release them both and study them. Hurt and feeling outnumbered by all the males, she slowly shakes her head.
You never let me do the things I need to do to be me.
As the two Outworlders turn to their son in hopes of clarification, her head bows, feeling defeated and dismissed by them. She turns and walks away, back into the forest. He watches her leave, then crouches before the sand-coated, flat rock. Picking up a stick, he brushes away a sandy layer of eggs, to reveal a cleaner patch that he pinches with his fingers and samples. A smile softens his stern features as he enjoys the taste. He looks up to meet their inquisitive eyes.
Nourishment.
Both aliens crouch down with him, and each pokes at the warm, soft mixture, now cooling on the rock, then tastes it off their digits. One clicks out a question.
Eggs.
He answers, as he shows them the shelled raw egg he still holds in his other hand. Both parents begin clicking out comments at the same time, and he looks from one to the other, as he follows the conversations. Suddenly he stands, looking around the beach.
What trees, Father? Fire won't cross the sand to reach the trees over there.
Facing the second elder, he continues.
Dad, you taught us well. Now you have to trust us to know right from wrong. We would never bring harm to the forest. We're not children anymore.
His words surprising him, just as much as they impress on the elders. He tried to defend her, he recalls, but she was so upset by that day, that she began to spend most of her time with Mother. Coming to join them, only occasionally, to bring their fathers the medicine Mother would send, or the times Mother would return to her tree. It slowly dawns on him, how much he's missed her. So why did he accuse her like that? He knows she would never have done it on purpose. Something was beginning to change within him, his attention returning to her, still talking with Tobias. Watching, as she leans forward kissing his cheek. Becoming jealous, as Tobias blushes deeply, that his fingers curl into fists, crushing the water lily he carries. Glaring at his friend, he steps into the clearing to confront them. Tobias, wanting no part of this, backsteps, turns and walks away. Leaving him face to face with her. Forgotten was his apology as he looks at her. His fists relax and the crushed blossom falls to the ground. Looking down into her eyes, he asks,
Where's my kiss?
She blinks in surprise, as she quickly retorts,
The day I kiss you is the day pigs fly.
with her sadness and pain still flowing hot within her. She turns, walking off in the opposite direction, leaving him to stand alone in the forest clearing. He looks at the ground, where the crushed blossom lay, trying to sort out what went wrong. Suddenly one of those memories hit him from that other time and place. No, not another place. This place. He lets the memory play out in his mind, hoping it gives him some guidance. Unaware that the two Outworlders are standing at the edge of the clearing and witnessing it all. As the water plane lands and Pop slowly guides it towards the island, a growing wave of excitement washes over him and his three older brothers. The vibration of the pontoon as it taps the dock. The sound of the door as Grandpa and his eldest brother open it and jump out to secure the plane to its moorings. The added hush as Pops turns off the motor and indicates it's safe for them to climb out. All adding to the building excitement. Being the youngest, this was the first time they let him join them, and nothing was going to stop him from seeing firsthand the site where the cottage he'd been hearing about for months was being built. Today, they've come to check if the cellar cement floor and walls have cured and dried properly. Having reached the clearing, he stands awestruck as he looks around at the height of the pine and spruce trees. Pop joining him, resting his hand on his shoulder.
One day this will all be yours, son. Yours and the woman you choose to make your wife.
In that instant, the two lifetimes merge into one for him, giving him a sense of calmness and purpose as he realizes what he has to do to make things right. He'd been working hard throughout his teen years. First with the aid of his fathers, when they weren't busy working in the laboratory on a project of their own. Scanning the ground, with one of the small crafts he was trained in. Exposing the lost foundation cellar and digging it out. Along the way, discovering some salvageable metal tools, cast iron pots, and pieces of broken ceramics, within the earth-filled foundation walls. Father even taught him how to use the laser on the second craft to weld the cast iron cracks together, making them servable once again. These past 2 years, the work continued, with the aid of his friends, Karan and Tobias, since the passing of his fathers. Even laughing at their teasing, that he's nesting, with a few good-natured tackles. Stone by stone, and clay mortar pile by mortar pile, the foundation was restored. Rock by rock and beam by beam, they built up the fireplace, roof, and walls. Creating glass panes for the windows, just as his alien fathers had taught him. It was a day of celebration, when the wooden door was added, making the cottage weather-tight. A loud splashing pulls his mind back to the here and now. All the while, wondering what that drink was, that mother gave him. Shaking his head to clear it, as a merman swims closer, holding up a giant, deep-bowled, half-clamshell.
Is this what you wanted?
He asks by way of greeting.
Huh? Oh, perfect. Just the right size. Thanks.
His strides, taking him into the shallows of the water to carefully retrieve the large shell, then back out again. Carrying it, as he departs, and walks along the path that leads back to the clearing. She steps into the clearing she planned to use as a shortcut across the island and stops short, surprised to see a cottage structure, standing solid and welcoming in its center. Awestruck, as smoke curls lazily from its chimney, the door open, letting in the gentle breeze of the day. So lost in the moment, she doesn't hear him coming from the second path. He smiles, stepping over and stopping next to her.
My cottage,
She whispers.
Our cottage.
He softly corrects with a smile, as his burden is carefully placed on the ground.
Even comes with a kitchen sink.
He gives her a moment to take it all in and studies her softening features.
how?
She murmurs curiously.
I remember building it in my early teens with Gramps, Pops, and my brothers.
As she remains silently staring at the cottage, he adds.
Just one thing.
Rules?
He slowly shakes his head.
A request. Will you cook me some eggs?
Laughter bubbles up and spills forth as she nods.
Yes.
His head bows closer to hers as she rises to her toes. Their lips softly brushing. Building into love's first kiss, that even the squealing sounds overhead, from a family of flying swine, can't interrupt. The last parting gift, from the Outworlders to their children.